They say dolls can't move on their own, that they don't think or feel or watch. But some things aren't meant to be understood. In 1970, a nurse received a doll as a gift. Within weeks, it was moving rooms, writing notes, whispering. At night, they locked it away, called it Annabelle, and prayed no one else would ever touch it. But stories have a way of surviving, changing hands, homes, and names. This isn't just about the Annabelle you think you know. It's about the ones no one talks about, the ones people find in basements, attics, thrift stores, forgotten, but never really gone. Dolls that stare a little too long, that always seem to return, no matter how far they're thrown. Tonight, we open the box. And once you hear these stories, you might never look at toys the same way again. If you're drawn to the darkness, to true accounts, buried legends, and whispered warnings, subscribe to Midnight Truths. New horrors arrive every week, and trust me, some things are better watched with the lights off. My name's Derek. I used to work security at St. Luke's, the old children's hospital outside of Dayton. You probably haven't heard of it unless you're from the area. It was shut down in the early 2000s, mostly due to budget cuts and a couple lawsuits no one ever really talked about publicly. I got the job through a buddy who worked third-party security. Nothing glamorous, just patrol the halls at night, log any disturbances, and make sure no idiot teenagers were breaking. And to film ghost hunting videos. You'd be surprised how often that happens. The first few nights were uneventful, cold, quiet. The whole place smelled like antiseptic and mold. My footsteps echoed off the tile, even though I tried to walk softly. I started doing rounds at midnight and 3 a.m. There were 6 floors, but only the first 3 had lights still working. Floor 4 and up were basically condemned, crumbling ceilings, peeling walls, paint flaking like dry skin. They told us not to bother going up there. Too dangerous. That's where the pediatric psych ward used to be. Anyway, I liked the quiet. I liked being alone. I didn't even mind the way my radio crackled sometimes for no reason. Old buildings make weird noises, you know? Then on my 7th shift, I saw her. It was just past 3 a.m. I was walking down the east wing of the 2nd floor when I passed one of the glass observation rooms, the kind they used for long-term care. Inside was a chair, overturned, nothing else, except for a doll. Just sitting there in the corner, small, porcelain, pale skin. One of those old-fashioned ones with a lace dress and glass eyes that catch the light wrong. I stopped and stared at it. I was sure it hadn't been there before. I'd passed that room multiple times the past few nights. The place had been completely empty. I logged it in my report, possible prop left behind, and moved on. The next night, the doll wasn't in that room. It was on the 1st floor, sitting in a wheelchair just outside the cafeteria. I froze. My radio crackled again, just static. I told myself someone was messing with me, maybe another guard trying to haze the new guy. So I took a picture of the doll on my phone. Then I moved it. I picked it up and placed it in the lost and found closet near the front entrance, locked the door, wrote it down. Done. Or so I thought. The following night, my first patrol went fine. But around 2:45 a.m., the emergency exit alarm on the 3rd floor pinged. I took the stairs, elevators never worked right, and reached the door. It was shut, no signs of a break-in. But across the hall, right outside room 319, was the doll. Same dress, same face, same cold glass eyes, sitting upright. Hands folded in its lap. This time, I didn't touch it. I radioed it in, item found, 3rd floor, unknown origin. They told me to photograph it again. I did. But when I checked the photo, the doll wasn't there, just the hallway. I took another picture, still blank. I reached for my radio again, but it was completely dead. Nothing but silence. That same heavy, pressing silence you get right before a thunderstorm. I started walking backward, keeping my eyes on the doll. I don't know why. I just didn't want to turn my back to it. Then I heard the sound, a dragging noise, like tiny ceramic feet scraping against tile. But I hadn't seen it move. It hadn't shifted at all. Still, the sound was unmistakable. I left, didn't finish my patrol, told my boss I had a migraine, got chewed out for not logging my full shift, but I didn't care. Something wasn't right. The next day, I went to the admin office during the day and asked if there were cameras in the third floor hallway. One of the old maintenance guys looked confused and said no, those hadn't worked in over a decade. I asked if anyone had been in the building, maybe a janitor or a repair crew. He said, "Only you, kid." I didn't sleep well that night. I seriously considered not going back, but I did. Stupid, I know. By then, I had stopped trying to explain things logically. I just wanted proof, anything I could show someone. So that night, I brought a small handheld recorder. Nothing fancy, just a digital mic, something I used back in college. At 3:12 a.m., I reached the hallway outside 319. The doll wasn't there, but the lights were flickering and the exit sign was buzzing like it had a short in it. I turned on the recorder and whispered, "Third floor, hallway 3, no doll." Possible. A loud thud interrupted me. It came from the stairwell. I pointed my flashlight, and at the bottom of the steps, 2 flights down, I saw it, sitting on the landing. It was closer this time. I stood still, just frozen. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was underwater. Then the doll stood up. I swear to God, it stood. Its legs didn't bend like a human's. They cracked at the joints, like something brittle snapping, but it stood. Then it turned its head toward me, and in a voice like a child whispering through broken glass, it said, "You saw me." I ran. No shame, no hesitation. I left the building, left the recorder running, drove home and didn't stop shaking for 2 hours. The next morning, I played back the audio. It picked up everything. My footsteps, my voice, the thud, and the whisper, "You saw me," crystal clear. I quit that day. Told them I had a family emergency. Didn't care about the money. Didn't want the final paycheck. I just wanted out. 2 weeks later, I got a padded envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo, a picture of me, taken from behind in that same third-floor hallway. And in the corner of the photo, barely in frame, half in shadow, was the doll, watching me. I've moved twice since then, changed numbers, switched jobs. Told myself it was a prank, maybe a sick joke by someone on staff. But deep down, I know it wasn't. I've looked into the hospital's history since. Found reports buried in local forums, parents claiming their kids would talk to an angel doll during treatment. One kid said she told them secrets, said she asked for blood in exchange for wishes. Nurses dismissed it until that kid went missing. Locked room, no windows, one doll left on the bed. They shut the hospital down 6 months later. People love to joke about haunted dolls, say they're just toys, just porcelain, but I know what I saw. And if you ever find a doll you don't recognize, one that seems to show up again and again, even after you've thrown it away, don't talk to it, don't take pictures, and whatever you do, don't see it. My name is Leah Torres, and I used to run a small YouTube channel where I unboxed weird internet items. It wasn't a big deal, just a few thousand subscribers, mostly people into creepypasta, urban legends, cursed boxes, that kind of thing. I called the series Dark Halls, mystery boxes from eBay, Reddit, the dark web. Most of them were obviously fake. Animal bones, fake blood, old VHS tapes labeled "Do Not Watch." You know the type. But the last box I opened was different. It arrived in early April. No return address, no stamp, just sitting in my PO. Box one day with "Play with Emmy" written in crayon across the top. I assumed it was a fan-made submission, probably trying to scare me, so I filmed an unboxing like always. Inside was a doll. Not one of those cute plushies or mass-produced plastic ones, but something handmade. It had a pale cloth face, two mismatched button eyes, and hair made of coarse black thread. The mouth was stitched shut. Its dress was red, faded and torn in places, and there were dark stains along the hem that looked suspiciously like old blood. I made a few jokes about it on camera, said it looked like something Tim Burton would throw away. People loved it. The video hit 120,000 views in 2 days, my highest ever. But the problems started that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft thump from the living room. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment, top floor, decent neighborhood, no pets. I figured something had fallen off a shelf. When I got to check, I found the doll on the floor by the coffee table. I'd left it on my desk in the studio room, across the apartment. I didn't even pause to question it. I laughed it off, put it back, and assumed I'd absent-mindedly moved it without realizing. Or maybe it just slid off the desk. The next morning, I noticed something stranger. My video, the one with the doll, had dozens of new comments overnight. Not unusual, but they all said similar things. Did anyone else hear it whispering? At 13:07, the doll moves its head slightly at 7:41, not a joke. Rewatching, I swear it blinked. I reviewed the footage. I didn't hear any whispering, and I definitely didn't see it move. But once you start looking, you start noticing. There was a tiny shift, like the head had turned slightly between cuts, even though I hadn't touched it. I checked the raw files, same thing. I told myself it was lighting, compression artifacts, but something in my gut felt off. I didn't upload for a few days. I couldn't. I kept waking up at night to small noises, tapping, dragging, that soft thump of fabric against wood. The doll never stayed where I put it. I'd wake up with it on the floor. Once, I found it in the bathroom sink. Another time, on my kitchen counter facing the door. I started recording everything, left my camera running all night, but the files would come out corrupted or the battery would drain within minutes, even when I used a wall charger. That's when I made the second video. I titled it, "This Doll is Actually Haunted," half joking, half panicked. I showed. The footage told people what was happening. The views skyrocketed, comments exploded. People told me to burn it, bury it, salt it, pray over it. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Then the messages started. Private D in Zige, weird email addresses. Most were trolls, but one message stood out. It was just a single line. Whatever you do, don't say yes to it. No name, no reply address. I was starting to feel like I was losing it. I barely slept. Kept hearing laughter in the hallway when no one was there. A child's voice, high and brittle, saying, "Let's play." Then came the live stream. I wasn't planning to go live that night. I was exhausted. But when I opened my laptop, the streaming software launched by itself. I thought maybe I'd left it running, but then I saw the preview window. It was already live. Thousands of people were watching. I hadn't even hit record. I was just sitting on my bed, staring at the screen in my pajamas. Behind me on the dresser was the doll. I turned around. It was facing the camera directly. Then it moved. Its head twitched sideways. The mouth, still sewn shut, pursed inward, like it was trying to speak. The chat went insane. People thought it was a prank, a setup, a special effect, but I wasn't doing anything. I didn't even. know how it started streaming. And then, in that same high, brittle voice, the doll whispered, "Say yes." I froze. There was no one in the room. The sound came from the doll. My mic picked it up clearly. People were clipping it in real time. The stream ended abruptly, cut to black. I didn't touch anything. I threw the doll in the trash the next morning and took it to a dumpster 4 blocks away. Didn't say a word, didn't look at it, just dropped it in and walked. That night, it was back on my pillow. No sign of how it got in. Doors locked, windows shut. This time, the stitching across its mouth was gone. It was smiling. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just sat there, cold sweat soaking my back, staring at this thing that wasn't supposed to be real. I picked it up, wrapped it in 3 plastic bags, duct taped it shut, stuffed it in a shoebox, and drove 45 minutes to the edge of town to bury it in the woods. I deleted my channel the next day. All of it, videos, emails, socials, gone, but the messages didn't stop. Now they came in the mail. No stamps, just folded pieces of paper with a single word, yes. I moved, twice, still the notes came. Sometimes I hear scratching at the walls late at night. Sometimes I find little red threads on my floor and my bed on the windowsill. I don't own anything with red thread. A few months ago, I got a voicemail. No caller ID, just a child's voice saying, "Please say yes." I'm lonely. I've never responded, not out loud. But lately, in dreams, I find myself nodding. If you see a mystery box labeled, "Play with me," don't open it. Don't joke about it. Don't film it. And if the doll asks you a question, don't answer, not even in your head. Because once you say yes, it never stops playing. There are some memories you don't realize you've buried until something, a sound, a smell, a name, drags them back like a body pulled from a lake. Mine surfaced a few months ago after visiting my mother in the care home. She's not really there anymore. Her eyes wander and her words tangle together like vines. But that day she looked at me, clear as glass, and said, "Is the doll still watching you?" I hadn't heard that voice in almost 30 years. The voice underneath her usual mumbling, the one from when I was 7, when we lived in that house on Emmeline Road, when I was locked in the quiet room. It's strange. I hadn't thought about that place in so long, but the moment she said those words, I saw it perfectly. The chipped green door, the yellow wallpaper curling at the edges, the smell of old blankets and dust and mildew. It had no light bulb, just a small square window near the ceiling that let in thin strips of light like prison bars. I always thought it was a closet, but my parents called it the quiet room. It was their punishment for what they called episodes. I had them a lot, apparently. Crying spells, nightmares, talking to people who weren't there. I'd wake up screaming about the man in the walls or the girl in the rocking chair. They assumed it was attention-seeking, so the quiet room became my consequence. 10 minutes at first, then 20, eventually full hours, until I learned to stop talking about what I saw. The only thing in there, besides an old wool blanket and a cracked wooden stool, was the doll. She sat in the corner on a small shelf built into the wall, always facing away. She had a faded blue dress and long brown curls that looked like they'd been brushed once, long ago. Her porcelain hands were dainty and chipped, and one of her glass eyes had a faint crack running through it like a spider web. I wasn't allowed to touch her. My mother made that clear. "She watches over you," she said once in a soft, serious tone. So behave. I never understood what she meant by that. But I remember clearly the first time the doll turned. I was maybe 8. I'd been crying in the room for over an hour. I'd broken a vase, I think, by accident. The sun was setting and the shadows were long and thin. I'd curled into the blanket in the corner, trying to stop the hiccups from sobbing too hard. Then I heard it crack, like wood shifting. I looked up. The doll was still on her shelf, but she was no longer facing the wall. She was facing me. I froze. My stomach flipped. My throat locked. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even breathe. I thought maybe my mom had snuck in and turned it, but the door was still closed. I hadn't heard it open. I whispered, "Did you move?" Nothing. So I closed my eyes and counted 1, 2, 3. When I opened them again, the doll was back in its original position, facing the wall. I told my parents. They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. My dad just sighed and said I needed to quit the games. My mother gave me a tight-lipped smile and told me I was just tired. But later that night, when she tucked me in, she whispered in my ear, "She only turns when you lie." After that, things changed. I didn't cry in the quiet room anymore. I didn't speak. I didn't move, but the doll did. She never moved when I was watching, but her position changed. Sometimes just a tilt of the head. Other times, her cracked. I would seem a little more open than the day before. Once, I came in and found her on the floor. No explanation. No shelf damage. I started drawing her in secret. I'd sketch her face over and over again. Her eyes, her mouth, her little hands. But every time I drew her, the face changed. Softer lines. A wider smile. It felt like she was becoming more real somehow. One night, I had a dream, at least I think it was a dream, where I was inside the quiet room, but the walls were gone, just blackness all around. And the doll was standing. Not sitting, standing. She looked at me and said in a voice like wind through broken glass, "I can keep you safe. Just stay with me." I woke up screaming. My parents locked me in the room again. I remember pounding on the door, begging them to let me out, sobbing that I didn't want to stay with her. I told them she cocked, that she moved, that she wanted me to stay forever. They didn't care. That night was the longest I ever spent in the quiet room. And it was the last because something happened. I was lying in the corner, arms over my head, when I heard the voice again. Not in a dream, not imagined, out loud, right next to my ear. "If they won't protect you, I will." Then I heard footsteps. Not adult footsteps, small ones, bare feet, soft padding. The door opened, but no one stood there. Just an open hallway. I ran out past my parents' room, out the back door, and into the cold night. I stayed on the porch until sunrise. When my parents woke up and found me, they were furious. But the quiet room was never used again. A few weeks later, we moved. No explanation. They packed everything except that doll. They left her. I remember watching through the car window as the movers closed the front door. And for a brief second, just a flash, I thought I saw her face in the upstairs window, watching. I didn't talk about it for years. Told myself it was stress, a child's fear, imagination, until my mother's question last month. "Is the doll still watching you?" I asked her what she meant, but she just looked confused, started rambling again. But the next day, the nurse called me. They'd found something strange in her bedside drawer, a folded note in my mother's handwriting. Dated just 3 days before. It said, "She followed him. I told her not to. The quiet room never stays empty. She's waiting for him to remember." I've had nightmares since then. Not of the doll, of the room, the green door, the cracked shelf, the window near the ceiling, and a voice whispering from the dark, "Come back." I'm still here. I visited the old house last week. It's abandoned now. The windows are boarded up, the roof is sagging, but the back door was open. I went in. I shouldn't have, but I did. The quiet room is still there. Same chipped green door. Same curled wallpaper. The shelf is gone, but in its place is a single small outline on the wall. A mark in the dust, like something sat there for years. I left quickly, didn't look behind me, but I swear I heard something from inside that room, something soft, something that said, "Lie again, I dare you." They say childhood trauma shapes the brain, that the mind protects itself by erasing the things it can't understand. But what if those things don't want to be forgotten? What if they follow you and wait patiently in a quiet room with no lights and one shelf, waiting to be remembered? There's a small town in western Pennsylvania called Bellwood. You won't find much about it online, no Wikipedia page, no mention in travel blogs or urban legend sites. But locals will tell you quietly, and only if they trust you, that Bellwood had a man who collected dolls. His name was Mr. Hollis, and he ran the only antique shop in town from the late 1970s to the mid-90s. The shop was small, tucked between an old post office and an abandoned bakery. You wouldn't think much of it from the outside, dust-coated. Windows, a rusted tin sign that read, "Hollis Curiosities," and a bell above the door that jingled like a wind chime every time someone walked in. Most people didn't go in, not because they were scared, just because the place felt wrong. Even in the daylight, the air inside was too cold. The light bulbs flickered. The wood floor creaked like it was groaning beneath your feet. And the dolls, God, the dolls lined every shelf, wall, and corner. Porcelain ones with glass eyes that followed you. Ragged cloth dolls that looked hand-stitched in the time before. Plastic, puppets, figurines, miniatures. Dolls with missing limbs. Dolls with cracked mouths and soot-smudged faces. Mr. Hollis loved them. He kept a logbook behind the counter. Every doll had a name, a country of origin, and a history, as he called it. He claimed each one came with a story who owned it, where it was found, how it came into his possession. Some of those stories were tragic. Others were disturbing. There was a doll from Czechoslovakia said to belong to a girl who drowned in 1922. Another from Louisiana that supposedly cursed a plantation owner's family. One by one, until none were left, people assumed it was all theatrics. A marketing gimmick to sell creepy antiques to thrill-seeking tourists. But the thing was, Mr. Hollis never sold the dolls. Not one. He told customers they were on display only. He didn't let anyone touch them, didn't let anyone take photos. He said the dolls didn't like that. And then, in the winter of 1996, he disappeared. One day, the shop was closed. Lights off. Bellwood sheriff said he never saw him leave, and no neighbors reported any signs of foul play. But the door was locked from the inside, and every curtain was drawn. When the landlord finally forced entry 3 weeks later after rent went unpaid and calls. When unanswered, they found the store untouched. No sign of struggle, no blood, no broken glass. Just one thing missing, Mr. Hollis, and one thing added. A new doll, small, slumped in the chair behind the counter. Pale porcelain, wire glasses, tiny stitched suspenders, and a nameplate pinned to its vest. Mr. Hollis, some people think he had a stroke. Others say he ran off and left the doll. Behind is a twisted joke, but in the years after, strange things began happening around Bellwood. There were rumors of children seeing a man-shaped figure moving through the woods near the old shop, always dressed in suspenders, always carrying something wrapped in cloth. A former clerk from the grocery store swore she passed him on the street. At dusk, except when she looked back, he was gone. No footsteps, no shadow. Just the sound of something small falling to the pavement, a single button, the kind found on a doll's coat. The antique store was never reopened. Eventually, the building was condemned after mold spread through the walls. but no one ever bought or moved the inventory. People said the air inside was too still, that the dolls shifted between visits. Some swore they blinked. By 2004, locals avoided the block entirely, and then came the disappearances. 3 in total, all within 4 months, all teenage girls. No connections between them, different schools, families, circles of friends. But each one had something strange in common. They'd all visited the old antique store the week before they vanished. Not inside, of course, it was sealed. But police later found photos on one of the girls' phones. Shots through the dusty windows. And in one of the pictures zoomed in, grainy but clear, you could see a new doll in the front window. A girl, blonde hair, school uniform. Eyes wide in what almost looked like terror. The same outfit that girl had worn the day she went missing. Another girl's mother reported finding an old hand-stitched doll in their laundry room 3 nights. After her daughter disappeared, no tags, no labels. Just a note tucked into the hem of the dress that read, "She talked too much." The case remains unsolved. I interviewed one of the few people willing to speak openly about it, a retired librarian named Carol Shaw. She said she knew Mr. Hollis well. Said he used to come into the library every Thursday afternoon and request obscure books on folklore, doll making, and spirit binding. At the time, she thought it was eccentric hobby stuff. She described him as polite, soft-spoken, never raised his voice. But once, just once, he scared her. It was near closing time, mid-January. Snow was falling hard, and Mr. Hollis was the last person in the building. She approached to tell him the library was closing when she saw what he was reading. Not a book from the stacks, his own journal, filled with sketches of dolls, dozens of them. Some lifelike, some monstrous. Notes in tight handwriting beside each sketch. Voice intact, obedient, no hunger today. Stared at me all night. Not a blank. Then, at the bottom of one page, she said my name. Carol said she backed away and didn't say a word. That night, she dreamed of dolls tapping on her window, hundreds of tiny hands. She never spoke to him again. There's a theory among paranormal researchers that dolls can act as vessels, that spirits, especially the restless or angry, gravitate toward objects that resemble life, that their presence animates those objects, sometimes permanently. And sometimes those spirits aren't victims. They're collectors. They gather, they watch, they wait. The shop was finally torn down in 2019. Construction crews were scheduled to demolish the building for a new storage complex. But midway through, work stopped. The foreman filed an incident report. It stated that on their first day, a crew member went inside alone to assess the basement. When he didn't return, 2 others went in after him. They found him sitting in a chair in the dark, not speaking, not blinking. In his lap, a doll. They said it hadn't been there before. And when they tried to move it, he screamed. Not words, just noise, like a trapped animal. They quit the job that same day. That doll was never found. Sometimes I wonder how many dolls Mr. Hollis really had. Not the ones on display, but the ones no one saw. The ones he never cataloged. The ones he kept in the basement, or the attic, or maybe in places no one thought to look. Because for all the stories, one thing never changed. No one ever saw him leave. And no one ever proved he died. So maybe he didn't. Maybe he's still here, watching, listening, adding. If you ever find a doll in your home that you don't remember buying, don't touch it. Don't move it. And whatever you do, don't name it, because that's how it starts. And that's what the collector is waiting for. Used to lie and say I didn't remember anything from that year. It was easier that way. For my parents, for my therapist, for myself. But the truth is, I remember everything: the house, the attic, the room we weren't supposed to enter, and especially the doll. Her name was Anabella. We moved into that house in late October. I was 9 years old, a quiet, overly observant child with too many questions and not enough friends. The house was old, 1908, I think, and sagging. In all the wrong places. My parents couldn't afford much, but they called it charming and full of character. I remember the staircase creaking like it hated us, and how cold it always was, even when the heater rattled for hours. On the third day, while exploring the upper floor, I found the door to the attic. It was a narrow, crooked little door at the end of the hallway, hidden behind a wardrobe we thought was nailed to the wall. I only found it because our cat kept staring at the corner, hissing. The wardrobe was lighter than it looked. I pushed it aside, and there it was, chipped white. Paint, a rusted handle, and no lock. Of course I opened it. The stairs were steep, and the air smelled like mothballs and dust. There were boxes everywhere, covered in old sheets. But in the far corner of the attic, sitting on a tiny wooden chair under a single bulb of yellow light, was a doll. She wore a faded white dress, stained with age. Her dark hair was braided neatly down her back. Her porcelain skin was cracked in thin, jagged lines that reminded me of frost on glass. And her eyes, God, her eyes, were glassy blue, wide open, and never blinking. I don't know how long I stared at her, but when I blinked, I swore her head had tilted slightly. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I just backed away slowly and went downstairs. That night, I dreamt of her. She was standing at the foot of my bed, arms outstretched like she was waiting for something. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The next morning, I asked my mom about the attic. She froze. "There's no attic in this house," she said flatly. "That door leads to old insulation. Stay out of it." I wanted to tell her I'd been inside, that I'd seen the doll, but something stopped me. Maybe it was her tone, or the way her eyes didn't match her smile. So I kept it to myself, and I went back the next day. Annabelle was still there, but this time there was something new. A little nameplate on her lap. Annabelle. 18831-891. That was the first time I noticed the smell, like mildew and iron, a rotting, wet scent that stuck to my clothes after I left. I stopped going up there for a while, but strange things started happening. I'd hear tapping at my window even though we were on the second floor, scratching behind the closet door. My toys would move during the night, never gone, just repositioned, and the whispers, always right as I was falling asleep. A girl's voice, barely audible, repeating the same phrase over and over. "You found me." One evening, my dad came home from work with a bandage on his hand. Said he'd cut it on a nail while fixing something in the basement. But the blood had soaked through 3 layers of gauze, and he looked pale. I remember asking him if he felt okay. He just said something shouldn't be disturbed. That night, I went back to the attic. Annabelle was no longer sitting, she was standing. Still in the same corner, still under the same light, but standing perfectly upright, arms at her sides, chin lifted like she was posing. The chair was tipped over behind her. I don't remember walking toward her, but I must have, because suddenly I was inches away, looking at her face. Her cracked porcelain mouth was slightly open now. There was something written on the wall behind her in a child's handwriting. "She won't let me leave." I ran. I didn't go back up there for 2 weeks. But every night the dreams returned. Her eyes, her voice, her mouth whispering from across the room. "Find my pieces." I started digging through the attic boxes. I couldn't stop myself. It felt like something was pulling at me from inside. My own skull. In one box, I found a child's shoe, tiny, black, and old-fashioned. In another, a ribbon stained red. A photograph wrapped in cloth, showing a little girl with lifeless eyes standing next to a tall man with a blurred out face. I showed the photo to my mom. She slapped it out of my hand before I could say anything. "Stop going up there," she hissed. "Do you want her to notice you?" That was when I realized she knew. She had always known. I confronted my dad. Later that night, he didn't deny it either. He just muttered something about not tempting it and keeping it contained. He said my curiosity would be the thing that breaks it loose. I asked him why we were even living there. He said, "Because she chose you." That was the last full sentence I remember him saying. The next morning, he was gone. Police said there was no sign of forced entry. His car was still in the driveway, no tracks, no struggle. Just his wedding ring left in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by a perfect circle of ashes. I didn't speak for a week. On the 7th day, I went to the attic. This time, Annabelle was sitting again, but she was smiling. Her cracked porcelain mouth had curved ever so slightly upward. There was a new object in her lap, my father's watch. Still ticking, still warm, I screamed for what felt like hours. My mother locked herself in her room and didn't come out for 2 days. When she did, her eyes were hollow. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. And then she said, "There's only one way to finish it." She handed me a small wooden box tied with red string. "Don't open it," she said. "Not until she tells you to." I asked who she was. My mother didn't answer. She walked into the attic later that night and locked the door behind her. I never saw her again. I was put into foster care a few days later. The state said it was neglect. The house was condemned. I was moved halfway across the country. New name, new town, new school. Everyone said it was over, but I never opened the box. And I never forgot her. The dreams never stopped. Every few months, I'd hear the voice again, a whisper behind my ear. "We're not finished." 2 weeks ago, after all these years, the box came back to me. I don't know how. I'd left it behind. But there it was on my kitchen table when I came home from work, red string perfectly tied, not a speck of dust on it. And beside it, a folded note. "You're ready now." I haven't opened it yet, but I can feel it. The same cold mess. From the attic, the same weight in the air, like she's near. Watching, you've probably heard the name Annabelle before. Maybe you thought it was just a movie. A made-up myth to sell tickets and scare teenagers, but I promise you, there was a real Annabelle, and her story isn't over. Because some dolls don't just haunt, they choose. And once they do, they never let go. You're not sure why you took the detour. The main road was open. Your GPS didn't glitch. And yet, somehow, you found yourself driving along a narrow, tree-lined path that wasn't on your map, where the sun barely pierced through the canopy. And the silence felt manufactured. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe something else. You just remember seeing the crooked wooden sign half hidden in the underbrush, Westmore Lane, and feeling the irrational need to see what was at the end of it. What you found was a house that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Not abandoned, just untouched. 2 stories tall, with warped white siding and tall, dark windows that reflected nothing. A small red mailbox stood at the edge of the unpaved driveway, leaning slightly, with the name Thorn scratched into its side in fading black ink. You told yourself you'd just turn around in the driveway, but your car stalled before you could put it in reverse. The engine didn't sputter, it just stopped, like something reached inside and shut it off. And for a long moment, you sat there with your hands on the wheel, staring at the house, unable to explain why your heartbeat suddenly felt so loud in your ears. You didn't mean to knock. Your hand did it before your brain registered the motion 3 short raps on the peeling front door, hollow and unnatural sounding. No one answered, but the door creaked open about 6 inches, just enough to show you a dark hallway inside. You called out once, then again. Nothing, but something about the silence on the other side wasn't empty. It was loaded, dense. You could feel it pressing back. That should have been enough. But instead, you stepped inside, because curiosity always wins, and something deeper, something colder had taken root in your stomach the moment you saw the sign. The air inside was thick. Not musty like you'd expect, but sweet, artificially sweet, like old perfume or rotting flowers. There were dolls everywhere, lining the walls, sitting in chairs, perched on shelves that bent under their weight. Big ones, small ones, wooden, porcelain, rag, cloth, each one unique. And each one facing you. You moved slowly down the hallway, past rooms full of strange, ornate furniture and lace curtains that didn't move even when the air shifted. The dolls seemed to multiply the deeper you went. On the mantel, in the hall, even tucked between stair railings. Some smiled, some didn't. A few were missing eyes or limbs. One was nailed to the wall through its hands, its face painted into a silent scream. You whispered under your breath, "What the hell is this place?" And felt for the first time like you were being watched, not by the dolls, but by the house itself. In the back room, you found the workshop. It looked lived in, clean, organized. Tools laid out in neat rows, a sewing machine threaded and ready, spools of yarn and hair and ribbon lined on shelves. On the workbench, a doll in progress, its face half carved. One eye socket hollow, the other already embedded with a shining glass orb that looked almost too real. It was staring right at you. Beside it, a book, open, not a journal, but a registry. Each page held a name, a date, a description. But it didn't describe dolls, it described people. Their height, their hair, their eyes, what they were wearing the last time they were seen. You recognized one name. A girl who went missing from a nearby town last year. You remembered her face on the news, her smiling school portrait. The doll, beside the book, had the same smile. You staggered back, knocking into something behind you, a shelf maybe, and the sudden sound made everything feel real again, like you'd broken a trance. You turned to leave, to run back to your car, but the hallway looked different now, longer, narrower. The dolls were closer to the walls, leaving less room to pass. And they weren't all facing forward anymore. Some had turned ever so slightly, heads cocked at unnatural angles. Watching, you didn't walk. You ran. You remember that part clearly. Pushed through the front door so hard it slammed against the wall. Outside, the air felt thinner, clearer, but the silence remained. Your car engine was still dead. You locked yourself inside and called for help. The call didn't go through. No signal. Just static. You tried to sleep that night, back home in your own bed. Told yourself it was just a weird detour, a creepy old house, but you couldn't stop thinking about the registry. The girl, the half-finished doll, the names. Some part of you knew you weren't supposed to see it, that the house had shown it to you deliberately. The next morning, there was a package on your doorstep, no return address, wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside, a doll, tiny, handmade, dressed in a miniature version of the clothes you'd worn the day before. Its face was eerily accurate, and its eyes were glass. You didn't scream. You couldn't. You took the doll and burned it. Watched it melt and blacken in a steel trash can, plastic and fabric curling inward like it was alive. But the next morning, it was back sitting on your kitchen table, unburnt. Same expression, same posture, and now it was smiling. You tried to ignore it. You threw it in the river. You buried it. You left it on a stranger's doorstep an hour away. But no matter what, it came back. Always clean, always perfect, always waiting. Then you started hearing the voice, late at night from somewhere in the corner of your room, near your closet or under your bed. I see you. Whispered, patient, cold. You tried sleeping with the lights on. Didn't help. One night, you awoke to find the doll sitting on your chest, staring into your eyes. You couldn't move, couldn't scream, only breathe shallow and rapid as it leaned closer. You went inside. That's what it said. In your own voice. You moved out of your apartment the next day. You stayed with a friend across the state. The doll followed. They saw it too. They heard it whisper until they told you to leave. You started researching, desperately, the name on the mailbox. The registry, Westmore Lane. There was no record of the address. No postal registration, no land deeds. Just an old newspaper article from 1948. A man named Elijah Thorne, arrested for abducting 5 children in the area. He was a doll maker. Claimed he was preserving them, keeping them safe from time. His house burned down the night before his trial. No survivors, no remains, no explanation. But the article had a photo, a black and white image of his house. It was the same house, unchanged. You don't know how that's possible. You don't know what kind of thing exists in that place or why it let you walk away, but it marked you. That much is clear. You've started seeing dolls in places they shouldn't be: subways, office windows, elevators. Some smile, some cry. One was in the back seat of your locked car, just sitting. You can feel yourself changing. Your reflection sometimes lags behind your movement. Your skin doesn't warm the way it used to. Sometimes when you speak, your voice sounds hollow. And last night, your eyes glowed faintly in the mirror. You think you're becoming part of it. A new doll in the registry. Incomplete for now, but almost ready. Because when you lie in bed, silent and still, you hear them whispering just beyond your door, tiny voices with no mouths. Sewing, carving, waiting, and one of them, always louder than the rest, says your name, followed by one sentence. He's almost done with you. I've never talked about this before, not to my family, not to my wife, not even to the cops when they showed up asking questions. I always told myself it didn't happen the way I remembered it, that it was the trauma or stress or some neurological trick the brain plays to protect you. But it's been 11 years now, and the memory hasn't faded. If anything, it's clearer than ever. And the worst part is, I still pass that place sometimes. Off Highway 36, tucked behind an overgrown service road that doesn't show up on maps. You wouldn't see it if you didn't know to look. Just a leaning green sign that reads Langley Hills Rest Stop. You'd think it was abandoned until you pull into the lot and see it's still maintained. Too well maintained. The lights always work. The benches are clean. And the same 3 vending machines are fully stocked, as if someone comes every day to refill them, but I know no one does. I know because I used to work for the state highway maintenance department, and Langley Hills isn't on any of our official lists. Back in 2013, I was doing overnights on the interstate, patching potholes, inspecting bridges, cleaning up debris after late-night wrecks. I lived out of a work truck most weeks, and it was routine to stop at rest areas to stretch, take a nap, or grab a drink. Langley Hills wasn't in my usual route, but I noticed it once while trying to find a place to pee. I was about 30 minutes off schedule, and my bladder was screaming. It was either that or the bushes. I remember pulling in and being surprised by how pristine it looked. Fresh paint, clean concrete, and a strange little motel-style structure on the far end 3 doors, each marked with a brass number, 1, 2, and 3. That was odd. Most rest stops have bathrooms, not rooms. I figured maybe it was an old ranger station. I didn't see any other vehicles in the lot. I remember that clearly. Not a single car. I went into the restroom first. It was freezing cold inside, and I remember hearing the faintest sound of humming, not music. Just someone humming a single note very softly, like it was coming from the walls. I chalked it up to bad pipes or an old vent. After I finished, I decided to check out the strange little rooms. The one marked one was locked. So was two, but room 3 opened when I turned the handle. I only meant to peek inside, but the second the door opened, I felt dot pulled, like walking into a memory that wasn't mine. The air was warm and smelled faintly of lavender. The bed was made, the lights were dim, and sitting in the chair by the small wooden desk was a woman, middle-aged, pale, wearing a tan dress like she stepped out of a 1950s magazine. Her hands were folded neatly on her lap. She smiled when she saw me, not in a creepy way at first, just polite, like I was expected. "I've been waiting for you," she said. I laughed nervously and said, "Sorry, I thought this was just a rest stop. I didn't know these were occupied." "They're always occupied," she said, tilting her head, "just not always full." Then she looked past me over my shoulder out the door and said something that chilled me. "There's still room for one more." I asked her what she meant, and she didn't respond, just kept smiling. I noticed her eyes were off, not the color, but the focus. Like she was looking through me, and her skin had a waxy texture, almost too smooth, too perfect. That was when I realized she hadn't blinked once. I backed out of the room quickly and shut the door, tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a private caretaker or one of those weird rest stops with motel-like staff housing. I got back in my truck, but I didn't leave right away. I watched the building from across the lot. No one came out. No lights changed. Just that humming sound again, drifting faintly from somewhere underground. That night, I told myself I'd imagined it. 2 nights later, I was back on the same route. Against every instinct, I pulled into Langley Hills again. I had to know if the rooms were real, if she was still there. All 3 doors were open this time. Room 1 was empty, just a cot and a chair. Room 2 had a man sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. He didn't even flinch when I said hello. I asked if he was okay. Nothing. His eyes were glazed over, his mouth slightly open like he was mid-breath, but frozen. And room 3? Room 3 was empty now. No woman, no lavender scent. But on the desk was a note. In cursive, short, just 3 words. "Room for you." That was when I started to panic. I left and never planned to go back. But the dreams started. Vivid, repeating dreams of the 3 rooms. Of a long hallway underground. Of voices calling my name through cracked walls. One night, I dreamt I opened room 4, except it didn't exist before, and saw myself sitting in the chair, smiling, not blinking. The next morning, my coworker, Brent, didn't show up for his shift. I called him, no answer. I drove by his place, empty driveway. I called his wife. She hadn't seen him since he said he was stopping for gas on the interstate. The night before, you know what I'm going to say. They found his truck parked neatly at the Langley Hills rest stop. Engine off. Doors locked. No sign of him, but I already knew he was gone. I went back. I had to. This time, room 2 was empty. Room 3 had the woman again, her smile wider, her dress stained at the hem. And room 1? Brent was there, still, sitting in the chair. By the window, hands folded in his lap. Not blinking. I screamed. I grabbed his arm, tried to pull him up. His skin was cold, waxen like porcelain. He turned his head an inch and whispered, "There's still room." I left. I don't remember how. I just remember screaming on the drive home, crying without knowing why. I didn't sleep for days. When the police questioned me about Brent's disappearance, I said nothing. What was I supposed to say? that he'd become part of a motel that doesn't officially exist, but I kept dreaming. Room 4, room 5, each one filled with another face I recognized, old coworkers. A woman who vanished from a gas station 20 miles away. A teen hitchhiker I gave a ride to once. Each face smiling, each one seated, waiting. The last time I drove past Langley Hills, I swore there were more doors. 6, maybe 7. Each with a new brass number, each waiting to be filled. I haven't gone back since. I quit the highway job. Moved 3 states over. But every now and then, in that space between sleep and waking, I hear the hum again. That low vibrating tone that gets under your skin. And sometimes when I walk past mirrors or glass doors, I catch my reflection sitting in a chair in a small, numbered room smiling at me. I don't know how many rooms they have now, but I know one thing for sure. There's always room for one more. It started with a missed call. Nothing extraordinary, just a standard 1 missed call notification on my phone. But what caught my attention was the number. It was saved in my contacts. A name I hadn't seen in over 6 years. Elliot Harper, my college roommate, my best friend, and someone who'd been dead and buried since March of 2017. I froze when I saw the screen. I thought it had to be some kind of glitch. Or spam. Maybe someone spoofing his number. That happens, right? But there was also a voicemail. A 13-second message left at 3:12 a.m. I didn't listen to it right away. My hands were shaking. It felt like I'd just been shoved back in time to that raw and blurry week when I got the news Elliot had been found in his apartment after a week of silence. The cause listed as accidental overdose. He wasn't that kind of guy. Everyone knew it. But no one asked questions, especially not me. I ghosted him during the last year of his life. It wasn't intentional. Just life, stress, miscommunication. I thought we had time. I finally pressed play. At first it was static. A low crackle, like a weak radio signal. Then came a voice, muffled, breathy, not quite a whisper, not quite speech. Just a single sentence. Why didn't you answer? I swear to God it was his voice. I dropped the phone. Stared at it for a long time, as if it might start ringing again. It didn't. I checked the number again. It was Elliot's down to the last digit. I knew because I'd never deleted it. I couldn't bring myself to. But the number had been disconnected years ago. I even called it, hands trembling, fully expecting some stranger or error message, but instead, it rang. 5. Full rings, then straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Elliot. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. The same old recording. I didn't leave a message. I hung up and sat in total silence. My fiancée asked what was wrong. I told her it was nothing. A spam call. She shrugged it off. But I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the voicemail was gone. Not deleted, gone, as if it had never existed. No record. No transcription. Nothing in my call log, either. I told myself I'd imagined it. A stress-induced memory glitch. Maybe my brain just wanted to punish me for never answering his last real message, the one he sent 2 days before he died. Just a simple, can we talk? I never replied. I don't even remember why. 3 days later, the phone rang again, same number. Same time, 3:12 a.m. This time, I picked up. Static, then breathing, and then, you left me. Not a question. This time, a flat statement. No emotion, just quiet certainty. I said his name over and over. Elliot, if this is a joke, if someone's messing with me, this isn't funny. Silence. Then the call ended. Again, no record. No incoming call. In the log. I recorded my screen the next night just in case. Nothing came. I started sleeping with the light on, phone in hand. My fiancé noticed I was getting distant. I told her I was stressed at work. She believed me for a while. The next call came a week later, but this time it wasn't just a voicemail. It was a video message sent through an unknown number. No return contact. Just a file labeled answer underscore me.mp4 dot double quotes. I shouldn't have opened it. It was dark, grainy footage, black and white, flickering. The camera was static like a security feed. The room looked familiar, dingy walls, a cracked ceiling fan spinning slowly, a small twin bed in the corner. Elliot's old bedroom. He was in the frame, but not like I remembered him. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his face pale, almost translucent. His eyes were open wide, but they didn't move. His body looked stiff, too still to be natural. Then slowly his head turned toward the camera, and in a voice completely devoid of life, he said, "You weren't there." The video cut to black. My hands were ice. I tried tracing the number, tried saving the video, but it vanished 5 minutes later, gone, just like the voicemails. Not even in my deleted folder. That was when the dreams began. I'd find myself in that room, the one from the video. I'd be standing in the corner, watching him sit on the bed. Over and over, every night. He never moved until the last second. He'd snap his head toward me and scream, "You left me alone." I'd wake up in a sweat, lungs burning, and the clock would always read the same time, 3:12 a.m. It started bleeding into my waking life. I began hearing things. The sound of the phone ringing when it wasn't, glimpses of Elliot's face in mirrors just over my shoulder. My phone screen would light up with nothing on it, no message, no caller ID, just light. I lost sleep, stopped eating. My fiancé finally confronted me. I broke down, told her everything. She said I needed help. A doctor, a therapist, a break. But I knew the truth. Elliot was trying to talk to me, or punish me, maybe both. The next night, I got another message. This one wasn't a video. It was a location, coordinates. When I looked them up, my blood ran cold. It was his old apartment building, the one they found him in. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I didn't want to go, but I had to. The building was still standing, but abandoned, condemned. Yellow tape across the stairwell, rotted wood covering some of the windows, but I found a way in. I don't know what I expected, maybe closure, maybe to find someone playing an elaborate, sick joke, but what I found was worse. His room hadn't changed. The furniture was gone, but the outline of his bed was still visible on the stained carpet, and carved into the wall, deep, desperate scratches were words, "Answer me," over and over, dozens of times. And on the floor, exactly where the bed had been, lay a phone, his phone, the same one the police never recovered. I picked it up, cold, covered in dust. But when I pressed the power button, it turned on. One missed call from me, and a voicemail. I pressed play. My own voice came through, crying, pleading. "I'm sorry, Elliot. I didn't know. I didn't mean to ignore you. I thought you were fine. I thought we had more time. I didn't know you were hurting like that. Please, please don't go." I had no memory of recording it. The call ended. The phone went dark. When I looked up, I was no longer alone in the room. He was standing in the corner, just like in the dreams. Same pale face, same wide eyes. He didn't speak. He just watched me. I whispered his name. He tilted his head. And then he said, very softly, "Now you know." The lights flickered. And when I blinked, he was gone. But the message stayed. Since that night, the calls have stopped. The dreams have too. But I can't shake the feeling that something was transferred to me in that moment. A burden, a piece of him. I still hear echoes of that final voicemail in the back of my mind when I lie awake at night. I wonder how many others get calls like that, messages from people they failed, warnings disguised as hauntings. I still have his number saved in my phone. Sometimes I stare at it and wonder if I should call back, but I never do because I think deep down he answered me, and whatever that voicemail unlocked, it can't be undone. It all started with a routine late night radio shift. I was the overnight DJ at WKLX, a small local station in a town that felt like it was fading out of existence. My job was simple: play music, take a few calls, read local news, and keep the airwaves alive until morning. Nothing unusual, or so I thought, until one night in October 2015. I'd been working that midnight to 6 shift for months, and the late hours had taken their toll. I was tired but content, alone in the dimly lit studio, the hum of the transmitter my only companion. Around 2:13 a.m., the phone rang, which was odd because calls that late were rare, and when they did come, they were usually pranksters or drunk locals, but this caller was different. The voice on the other end was calm, almost monotone, but with an edge of something deeply unsettling beneath the surface. The man said he had a message for the listeners, something important, and insisted I broadcast it live. I thought it was a joke at first, a strange stunt to disrupt the station. But his tone was so serious, so utterly devoid of humor, it sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I opened the mic and told him he had 2 minutes. Then he spoke. His words were cryptic, like something out of a conspiracy theory, but delivered with an eerie certainty. He talked about a presence living in the town, a shadow that had lingered for decades, a darkness that fed on fear and pain, growing stronger with every secret buried beneath the streets. He said it had been waiting, watching, and that the broadcast was a warning. When the clock strikes 3, it will come for the last broadcast, and no one will be safe. As he spoke, the studio lights flickered. The equipment buzzed with static, and my phone lit up with dozens of missed calls. Then the line went dead. I sat frozen, the mic still hot, heart pounding like a drum. The usual upbeat playlist was replaced by a strange, low hum that seeped from the speakers, like an undercurrent beneath the music. The station's usual warm glow was replaced by shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. I glanced at the clock. 2:58 a.m., 10 minutes until the supposed last broadcast. Suddenly, the power cut out. The studio plunged into darkness except for the dim glow of the emergency exit sign. The hum stopped. Silence. Then the studio phone rang again. I reached for it, hands trembling, but the line was dead, except for a faint whisper. "We're coming." I tried to call the station manager, no answer. The backup generators failed. I was alone, cut off from the outside world. I realized then the caller had been right, the presence was real, but what was it? And why? Target a radio broadcast, minutes stretched like hours. At exactly 3 a.m., the equipment powered back on, but something was different. The music had been replaced by a distorted voice, repeating a message in a language I didn't recognize. The frequency shifted, the signal warped, and suddenly, images flashed on the small studio monitor. Static turned into shadowy figures moving. In the darkness, faces twisted in agony, reaching out like they wanted to escape the speakers. I called the police, but the lines were jammed. Outside, I heard footsteps, faint but getting closer. I locked the door, but it rattled as if something was trying to break in. Then the lights flickered back on, revealing the studio empty, no shadow figures, no sounds, just the faintest trace of cold air brushing past my neck. I fled the station at dawn, never returning. The broadcast was pulled from archives, deleted, from records. The town whispered about a curse on the station, about voices heard late at night on dead air. Some said the station went off the air permanently after that night. Others swore they heard faint voices in their radios, warnings or cries for help. I still have nightmares about that night. The presence never left me. Sometimes when I turn on a radio, I hear that distorted voice, the whispers from the dark, calling me back. And I wonder how many others have heard it too, how many are waiting for the last broadcast. When my grandmother passed away, I inherited her old Victorian house, a sprawling relic of creaking floorboards and peeling wallpaper nestled at the edge of town. I wasn't close to her, not really. I barely remembered the summers I spent there as a child, too caught up in my own world to notice the heaviness that seemed to cling to those walls. After she died, I decided to move in, partly because I needed a fresh start, and partly because selling the house felt wrong. Something about it felt ... unfinished. The first few days were uneventful. I cleaned out drawers, dusted off the antique furniture, and tried to make sense of the mountain of old letters and photographs she left behind. But every night as I tried to sleep, I heard the whispers. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling, the groans and creaks typical of an old home. But the whispers were different. Soft, fragmented voices that seemed to come from the attic above my bedroom. I'd never been up there. The attic door was sealed shut, a thick layer of dust covering the old wooden latch. Curiosity gnawed at me until one evening, armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, I forced the door open. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of something rotten. The attic was cluttered with old trunks and faded furniture draped in moth-eaten sheets. But what caught my eye was an old rocking chair, positioned in the far corner, slowly rocking back and forth, though no breeze stirred. My heart raced, and I told myself it was a draft, or maybe the chair had been left that way. But when I stepped closer, the whispers became clearer, disjointed words, fragments of sentences that made no sense but felt charged with sadness and warning. Leave ... before it's too late ... I froze. For days after, I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination or exhaustion, but the whispers grew louder or insistent. Sometimes I heard my name, whispered just beyond comprehension, like someone standing just out of sight. One night, the whispers changed. They turned into pleading, desperate voices begging for help, begging me not to open certain drawers, not to touch the old family Bible locked in the study. I thought I was going insane. One afternoon, I found an old journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. The handwriting was shaky but legible, dated back nearly a century. It belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman I'd never met but who seemed to have lived a life haunted by secrets. Her entries spoke of a presence in the house, something dark and watchful, something that fed on fear and regret. She wrote of strange rituals, of locked rooms no one was allowed to enter, and of voices that whispered from the shadows, driving her family to madness. Reading the journal, I realized the whispers weren't random. They were warnings. Warnings about something trapped inside the house, something tied to the bloodline, to the family history I barely understood. The nights grew worse, shadows shifted in the corners of my vision. I'd wake to cold spots, the sensation of breath on my neck, and the unmistakable feeling that I was not alone. One night, the whispers led me back to the attic. The rocking chair was moving again, faster this time. In its seat lay an old music box, one that I'd never seen before. It played a haunting melody that echoed through the house, a song I'd heard in my childhood dreams, but never knew the source of. I tried to close the attic door, but it slammed shut on its own, trapping me inside. The air grew heavy, suffocating, and the whispers turned into screams. Voices overlapping, crying. Out in rage and sorrow, I dropped the music box. It shuddered. The room fell silent. When I finally found a way out, the house seemed changed. The oppressive weight had lifted slightly, but I knew the darkness was still there, lurking. I've since learned that the house holds the memories of every soul who suffered within its walls, and that the attic is a gateway, a thin veil between this world and the next. The whispers are not just warnings, they're pleas for salvation, for release. I've made a promise to listen, to honor the voices, even if it means facing the darkness myself, because some truths hide in shadows, and some ghosts never rest until they're heard. I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. I've always been a rational person, the kind who looks for science behind every strange occurrence. But something happened to me recently that I still can't explain, and it's changed everything. It started about 3 months ago. I was getting ready for work one morning, brushing my teeth in the bathroom, when I noticed something odd in the mirror. At first, I thought it was just the angle of the light or maybe a trick of the steam fogging up the glass. But then I realized my reflection wasn't quite matching me. My eyes looked off, not the way they normally did. Darker, more hollow, almost like they were watching me, but not really me. I blinked and shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. But as days passed, the feeling didn't go away. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses in the mirror of my reflection, lagging a moment behind my movements, or making subtle expressions I wasn't making. I thought maybe I was tired, stressed, or even hallucinating. But it kept happening more frequently and with greater intensity. One evening, after a long day at work, I looked in the mirror and saw something that made my blood run cold. My reflection smiled, a slow, sinister smile, but I wasn't smiling. I froze, unable to move, staring at that twisted grin staring back at me. Then the lights flickered and the reflection snapped back to normal. I tried to brush it off as a trick of the light or exhaustion. I didn't want to admit that something felt fundamentally wrong. But that night, when I went to bed, I had the most vivid nightmare. I was trapped inside the mirror, surrounded by endless reflections of myself, all twisted and distorted. They whispered to me, mocking me, telling me they were waiting to take over. When I woke, I felt exhausted and uneasy. I started avoiding mirrors altogether, covering them up or turning them away. But the more I avoided them, the stronger the feeling grew. It was as if whatever was in the reflection was hungry for attention. Then strange things began to happen outside of mirrors. Objects in my apartment would shift slightly when I wasn't looking. Doors that I was sure I had locked were open. My phone showed missed calls from my own number, but when I answered, there was only static. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there. I confided in a close friend, hoping for some reassurance. She laughed it off, saying I was probably just stressed or imagining things. But I wasn't. Something was wrong. Something was invading my life. One day, I decided to test it. I set up my phone to record the bathroom mirror while I left the room. When I checked the footage later, my heart skipped a beat. For a full 10 seconds, my reflection moved independently, stepping out of the mirror and staring directly into the camera with eyes full of malice before disappearing back into the glass. I wanted to destroy the mirror, smash it into pieces. But the feeling of dread kept me rooted in place. What if breaking it made things worse? What if it was already too late? The nights grew darker. I started hearing whispers coming from the bathroom mirror, voices just beyond comprehension, urging me to let go, to join them. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. My own reflection felt like an enemy, a dark twin waiting for the moment I wasn't paying attention. One morning, I woke to find a message written on the foggy bathroom mirror and what looked like lipstick. We are one. I didn't remember writing it. Nobody else had access to my apartment. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a reflection, it was about identity. The thing in the mirror wanted to replace me, to take over my life, my memories, my soul. I don't know how much time I have left before it fully crosses over. Every time I look in a mirror, I see less of myself and more of that thing, a hollow, sinister version of me waiting. If you ever feel like your reflection is watching you, remember my story. Some things aren't just tricks of the light. Some mirrors hide secrets that should never be looked into too long. Because once it starts, there may be no way back. When I first moved into the old farmhouse, I thought I'd finally caught a break. After years of cramped apartments, broken leases, and roommates who made life unbearable, the listing had seemed too good to be true. Two-story home, nearly an acre of land, rent so cheap it felt illegal. It was off a long, winding road in Vermont, surrounded by forest, quiet, isolated. Perfect, thought the landlord. A quiet older man named Harris barely spoke during the walkthrough. He unlocked the front door, handed me the keys, and said, "Only rule is, don't open the locked door in the basement." Then he turned, got in his truck, and drove away. I thought he was joking at first. I laughed, but he didn't smile. He just repeated it, "Don't open it." Naturally, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was an old root cellar. Or a maintenance hatch. I assumed it was where they kept utility controls. Whatever. I moved in that same weekend. For the first few days, everything was fine. Peaceful. The air was cleaner out here. The stars actually visible at night. I spent my days unpacking, walking through the nearby woods, and finally writing again, something I hadn't been able to do in years. But by the end of the first week, I started hearing things. It started. Small, what I thought were mice in the walls. Scraping, soft thumps. Sometimes a low tapping sound at night, like someone knocking from far away. I ignored it. Old house, old bones. Probably settling, but it didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. Around the ninth night, I woke up to what sounded like whispering. Faint, like someone talking to themselves right below me. My bedroom was on the second floor, directly above the living room. I figured maybe I'd left the TV on, or maybe it was wind. But when I got up to check, the house was silent. I didn't sleep after that. The next night, I left my phone recording on the kitchen table. 8 hours of footage. I listened to it the next morning. For the most part, silence. Until around 3:12 a.m., when a voice low, gravelly murmured 2 words, "Not yet." I replayed it a dozen times. Same phrase, same voice. And it didn't sound like a recording glitch. It sounded close. Like it came from beneath the microphone, from beneath the floor. That's when I remembered the basement. I had barely gone down there, only once. When I first moved in, just to make sure the breakers were working, it was dark, unfinished, and cold. But now I couldn't stop thinking about the locked door Harris warned me about. I told myself I wouldn't go near it, that I would follow his instructions. But curiosity is a slow poison. It creeps into your thoughts. I started wondering, why was it locked? What could be so dangerous about a door? By the second week, things escalated. I began waking up at 3:12 every night without fail. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps on the basement stairs. Other nights, it sounded like something scratching at wood. Once, I found dirt on the living room floor and a long, narrow trail leading from the basement door and stopping just before the couch. That night, I dreamed of a man with no face, standing in a room with no ceiling. He kept pointing at something behind me, but when I turned around, there was only a mirror, and in it, I wasn't me. I stopped writing. I stopped sleeping. I started checking the basement door every night. It never moved. The lock never changed. But something behind it had started breathing. Not literally, maybe. But you know how a room feels when someone's in it? That feeling you get when someone walks in behind you and you can feel the air shift. That's how the house started to feel all the time. Like I wasn't alone anymore. Then came the smell, like damp earth, rotting leaves, mold, and metal. The kind of smell you find in an old graveyard, soaked into stone. I called the landlord. I asked him if there was something dead in the walls, a raccoon, maybe, or mold in the vents. He cut me off. I told you not to mess with the door. Sad, voice tight. If you leave it alone, it'll go quiet again. It always does. What is it? I asked that he hung up. That night, I made a decision. I went to the basement, thought it was colder than I remembered. Not just cold. Like walking into a freezer. I took a flashlight, stepped down the creaking stairs, and walked toward the locked door. It was metal, painted black, with no handle. Just a latch and an old, rusted keyhole. The air around it was heavy, thick, like it resisted my presence. I placed my ear to it. Silence. Then, the softest voice imaginable. A whisper, so faint I thought. I was imagining it. Let me out. I jumped back, heart racing. My flashlight flickered. Something inside that room knew me, knew I was there. I ran back upstairs, locked every door, and sat on the floor until morning. I told myself I'd move out, break the lease, screw the deposit. I couldn't stay there another night. But when morning came, something changed. The house was warm, quiet. The air felt clean again. The birds were back outside. For the first time in days, I felt calm. The door had gone silent. I convinced myself it was over. That maybe Harris was right. Maybe it just needed to be left alone. I told myself it had been some kind of shared psychosis. Isolation. Lack of sleep. Imagination. For the next 2 days, things were normal. Peaceful. No noises. No whispers. No smells. Until the third morning, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. I hadn't been outside in 2 days. The next night, I locked my bedroom door. I pushed a dresser in front of it. I put salt along the floorboard, something my grandmother once said would keep spirits out. I left the lights on. Still, I woke up in the basement, lying on the concrete floor, my clothes damp with soil, my hands bleeding. I didn't remember getting there. Didn't remember unlocking any doors. The black metal door was still shut. But this time, there was something new carved into it. One more night. That was last night. I'm writing this now because I know I won't make it to the next morning. I've nailed the basement door shut. I've blocked the stairs with furniture. I've locked every window, every door, but I can still feel it below me. Breathing. And just now, as I type that sentence, I heard the first knock. Slow. Deliberate. From inside the floor. If someone finds this, if anyone's reading this, don't go looking for the farmhouse. Don't ask questions. And if you ever move into a home and someone tells you not to open a door, don't, because some doors don't keep things out. They keep things in.